At 7:02 a.m., Daniel Kessler predicted the event. Exactly. Down to the minute. Down to the system. Down to the sequence of adjustments that would follow. And he was still wrong. That was the first time the system betrayed him in a way he could not explain. Not because it failed. Because it agreed with him. The model aligned perfectly. Every variable matched. Every interaction followed the expected path. Every projection confirmed the same outcome. A freight network adjustment in the Midwest. A minor energy redistribution. A traffic reroute to compensate. All converging toward a single, controlled shift. Daniel watched the projection form. Calm. Precise. Confident. Execute simulation, he said. The system complied. The result appeared. Clean. Stable. Predictable. Exactly what he expected. He nodded once. Run live alignment. The technician hesitated. You're certain? Daniel did not look away. Yes. Because certainty had always been his advantage. Because for 2 episodes now, the system had been unstable. And this, finally, looked stable again. That was the mistake. The command was executed. Across multiple systems, small adjustments began. Rail timing shifted. Energy load redistributed. Traffic responded. Everything aligned. Exactly as predicted. Daniel watched the live data. Every metric confirming the model. Every signal matching the projection. Everything was correct. For 30 seconds. Then something changed. Not in the system. In the outcome. The technician leaned forward. That's not right. Daniel's eyes narrowed. What? The technician pointed. The response. Daniel looked. Everything was still aligned. Everything was still within expected parameters. And yet, something was different. The secondary effects. They did not follow the model. The traffic system adjusted earlier than expected. The energy grid compensated in a different region. The rail delay propagated in the opposite direction. Daniel frowned. That's not possible. The analyst spoke quietly. The inputs are correct. Daniel nodded. I know. Then why is the outcome different? Silence. Because that question had no answer within the system. Daniel leaned closer. Recalculate in real time. The system complied. The model updated. And for the first time, it diverged from itself. The projection no longer matched the live data. Not because of error. Because of behavior. The technician whispered, it's changing as it happens. Daniel felt it clearly. The pattern was no longer following prediction. It was responding to reality faster than the model could adjust. He spoke slowly. It's adapting mid-process. The analyst shook his head. That's not how systems work. Daniel answered quietly. It is now. Because the field had changed everything. Without structure, prediction becomes unstable. Without stability, models become suggestions. Not answers. The display updated again. The divergence widened. Small at first. Then larger. Then undeniable. Daniel stepped back. For the first time, he had predicted something perfectly. And still failed. Across the world, Eleanor felt it before she saw it. A shift. Not sharp. Not sudden. But wrong. She stood in the archive, eyes focused, body still. Michael looked at her. What is it? Eleanor spoke quietly. Something is being forced. Michael frowned. That's been happening. Eleanor shook her head. No, pause. This is different. Because this time, the pressure did not feel natural. It felt imposed. And when pressure is imposed incorrectly, the system responds differently. She moved toward the desk. Signals were already appearing. Early. Unstable. Misaligned. Michael read them. These don't match anything. Eleanor nodded. I know. The stranger stood near the doorway. Watching. As always. Eleanor turned to him. They're trying to control it again. The stranger nodded. Yes. Michael stepped forward. But they got it right this time. Eleanor shook her head slowly. No, they think they did. Because everything looked correct. Everything aligned. Everything matched. Except the outcome. That was the difference. The stranger spoke quietly. Prediction assumes stability. Eleanor nodded. And there isn't any. Michael exhaled. Then what are they doing? The stranger answered simply. They are confirming a model that no longer reflects the system. Silence. Because that meant something critical. Daniel was no longer making mistakes. He was making accurate predictions, for a system that no longer existed. Back in the control room, Daniel watched the divergence grow. Every second, the system moved further from the model. Not randomly. Consistently. In a new direction. The technician spoke quietly. We need to stop the sequence. Daniel did not respond. Because he was seeing something else. The divergence had structure. Not a spiral. Not a wave. Not a line. But a pattern. A new one. He whispered, it's correcting. The analyst frowned. Correcting what? Daniel answered slowly. Our interference. Silence. Because that meant the system was not failing. It was compensating. And compensation changes outcomes. He stepped closer. Track deviation path. The system complied. A new visualization appeared. Not the predicted path. The actual one. It curved. Not inward. Not outward. Sideways. Across systems. Across interactions. Avoiding the imposed structure. Michael looked at Eleanor. What does that mean? Eleanor answered quietly. It's choosing a different path. Because that was the only way to describe it. Not random. Not chaotic. Deliberate. The stranger spoke softly. Not choosing. Pause. Responding. But the result was the same. The outcome was no longer what Daniel predicted. And that meant something fundamental had broken. Not the system. The assumption. That prediction could lead behavior. Now, behavior was leading prediction. And prediction was always behind. Daniel stared at the screen. For the first time, he did not feel in control. He felt late. In forgotten places, where predictions fail even when they are correct, where outcomes no longer follow expectation, justice does not shout. It whispers. And every act leaves an echo. At 7:09 a.m., Daniel Kessler attempted to fix the model. That was the moment he made the situation worse. Not because the correction was wrong. Because the system no longer responded to correction the way it used to. He stood in front of the display, watching the divergence widen in real time. The projection still held its original structure. Clean. Logical. Predictable. But the live system had already moved beyond it. The technician spoke carefully. The deviation is increasing. Daniel nodded. I see it. Should we stop the sequence? Daniel did not answer immediately. Because stopping meant losing visibility. And right now, visibility was the only thing he still had. No, he said. Adjust the model. The analyst stepped forward. We already recalibrated. Daniel shook his head. Not enough. Because the system had changed. And a system that changes requires more than adjustment. It requires redefinition. He pointed at the display. Reduce prediction weight on structure. The technician frowned. You want to remove convergence modeling? Daniel nodded. Yes. Pause. It's no longer reliable. That was the first time he had said it out loud. The spiral was gone. The wave had failed. The line had dissolved. And now, structure itself was no longer a stable variable. The command was entered. The model shifted. Less emphasis on convergence. More emphasis on interaction. More real-time adjustment. More flexibility. The display updated. For a moment, it looked better. The projection aligned closer to the live system. The divergence narrowed slightly. The technician exhaled. That's working. Daniel did not move. Because he had learned something already. Temporary alignment did not mean stability. It meant delay. The system updated again. The alignment held. For 10 seconds. Then, it shifted again. Not away from the model. Around it. The analyst leaned forward. It's bypassing the projection. Daniel narrowed his eyes. Track deviation vector. The system complied. A path appeared. Not predicted. Not simulated. Actual. The live system was no longer diverging randomly. It was moving intentionally. Around the model. Avoiding alignment. The technician spoke quietly. That's not correction. Daniel answered slowly. No, it's compensation. Because the system was no longer reacting to the model. It was reacting to interference. And avoiding it. That was the difference. Daniel stepped closer. Increase adjustment sensitivity. The technician hesitated. That will amplify instability. Daniel nodded. Yes. That's how we see it. Because subtle changes were no longer enough. The system needed to be pushed harder to reveal its behavior. The command was entered. The model recalibrated. Higher sensitivity. Faster response. More aggressive adjustments. The display reacted instantly. The projection snapped into alignment again. Closer than before. More accurate. More precise. For a moment, Daniel believed he had it. This is it, he said quietly. The technician watched carefully. The analyst leaned in. Everything aligned. Everything matched. Everything made sense. For 15 seconds. Then the system responded. Not by diverging. By shifting entirely. The projection did not drift away. It became irrelevant. The live system moved into a state the model could not represent. The display struggled. Trying to render behavior that no longer fit its parameters. The technician stepped back. We can't map this. Daniel remained still. Then stop mapping it. The words came out differently this time. Not as strategy. As realization. Because mapping required stability. And stability was gone. The analyst spoke quietly. Then what are we doing? Daniel did not answer immediately. Because the answer was no longer within the model. He looked at the live data. At the movement. At the constant adjustment. At the absence of anything fixed. We observe, he said. But even as he said it, he knew it was not enough. Because observation without understanding is just delay. And delay is always too late. A new alert appeared. Real-world impact. Minor. but measurable. A freight line in Illinois experienced a timing conflict. Not severe. Not dangerous. But unexpected. The technician pointed. That wasn't in the model. Daniel nodded. I know. The analyst checked another screen. Energy fluctuation in Ohio. Another. Traffic reroute in Pennsylvania. All small. All contained. All manageable. But all unpredicted. Daniel felt it clearly. For the first time, the system was producing outcomes he could not anticipate. Not because they were complex. Because they were different. Across the world, Eleanor stepped forward. She felt it immediately. A ripple. Not large. But real. She opened her eyes. It started. Michael looked at her. What did? Eleanor turned to the desk. Consequence. Because until now, everything had been contained. Within systems. Within models. Within observation. Now, it was reaching outward. She checked the signals. Rail. Energy. Traffic. All showing small deviations. All occurring within the same narrow window. Michael read the data. These are minor. Eleanor nodded. Yes. Pause. For now. Because small shifts accumulate. And accumulation leads to something larger. The stranger stood in the doorway. Watching. Eleanor turned to him. They crossed the line. The stranger nodded. Yes. Michael frowned. What line? The stranger answered quietly. The point where influence becomes disruption. Silence. Because that was not a technical boundary. It was a threshold. And once crossed, it cannot be undone easily. Eleanor spoke carefully. We need to respond. Michael looked at her. How? Eleanor hesitated. Because this was new. They had never intervened at this level before. They had always responded within systems. Now, they needed to respond across them. She took a breath. Earlier. Michael frowned. That's not specific. Eleanor shook her head. It doesn't need to be. Because specificity required structure. And structure was gone. The stranger spoke softly. Move with it. Eleanor nodded. Yes. She opened the network channel again. This time, her message was different. Shorter. More direct. Do not wait for confirmation. Act on the first shift you recognize. She paused. Then added one more line. Small adjustments matter now. She sent it. Across the world, the network responded. Faster than before. Earlier than before. Not perfectly. But closer. Closer to the movement. Back in the control room, Daniel watched the external signals. They were changing. Not just reacting. Anticipating. The technician pointed. They're moving earlier. Daniel nodded. I see it. The analyst frowned. They're interfering. Daniel shook his head. No, pause. They're aligning. That was the difference. Alignment did not fight the system. It moved with it. And movement was what the system had become. Daniel stepped back slowly. For the first time since the experiment began, he was not leading. He was following. And he did not know how to do that. He spoke quietly. We're behind. The technician did not respond. Because it was obvious now. The model was behind. The predictions were behind. And Daniel was behind. Across the world, Eleanor stood still again. Feeling the movement. Tracking it. Not with data. With awareness. Michael looked at her. Are we catching up? Eleanor answered quietly. For now. Pause. But they're not stopping. And neither was the system. Because once change begins, it does not wait. In forgotten places, where systems begin to correct those who try to control them, where prediction fails even when it is precise, justice does not shout. It whispers. And every act leaves an echo. At 7:16 a.m., the first real event happened. Not in the model. Not in the projection. In the world. And no one predicted it. Not even Daniel. It began quietly. So quietly that, at first, it did not feel like anything important. A freight line just outside St. Louis reported a timing delay. 2 minutes. That was all. 2 minutes late on a schedule that shifted constantly across the country. The kind of delay that never made it past the first layer of monitoring. The kind of delay that resolved itself without attention. Daniel barely noticed it. His focus remained fixed on the model. Still trying to reduce divergence. Still trying to restore alignment. Still trying to prove that prediction could regain control. The technician flagged it anyway. Rail delay in Sector 3. Daniel nodded slightly. Resolve locally. That should have been the end of it. A minor issue. Contained. Predictable. But it did not stay contained. 30 seconds later, the system updated. The delay moved. Not forward along the expected route. Not backward. Sideways. The analyst leaned closer to the screen. That's not following sequence logic. Daniel turned slightly. What do you mean? The analyst pointed at the display. It didn't propagate downstream. Pause. It appeared somewhere else. Daniel stepped forward. The second delay was already visible. Different line. Different route. No direct connection. And then a third appeared. The technician's voice tightened. That's not how this system works. Daniel stared at the data. It is now. Because the pattern had already changed. The delay was no longer moving through the system. It was being redistributed by it. That distinction mattered. Movement follows structure. Redistribution ignores it. Within seconds, more alerts appeared. Traffic congestion in Chicago. Energy fluctuation in Indianapolis. Signal irregularity in Kansas City. Each one small. Each one manageable. Each one explainable on its own. But together, they formed something else. Not a chain. Not a sequence. A field of impact. The analyst spoke quietly. These are connected. Daniel nodded slowly. Yes. But not in any way the model could interpret. Because the model depended on structure. And structure no longer held. The technician looked at him. Do we isolate the origin? Daniel shook his head. There is no origin. That was the realization. The event did not begin at a point. It emerged across multiple points at once. Not caused by a single failure. Caused by interaction. And interaction cannot be isolated the same way. The display updated again. The signals multiplied. More systems. More locations. More adjustments. Still small. Still within tolerance. But increasing. Daniel felt it clearly now. Not instability. Escalation. He spoke more sharply. Track spread rate. The system processed the data. The result appeared quickly. Faster than expected. Significantly faster. The technician stepped back. That's accelerating. Daniel nodded. Yes. Because once redistribution begins without structure, it does not slow down. It expands. Across everything. Across the world, Eleanor Hayes felt it before she saw it. A shift in the system. Not sharp. Not violent. But wrong. She stepped forward instinctively. It started. Michael looked at her. What started? Eleanor turned to the screen. The first real event. Because this time, the movement was not contained. She pulled up the signals. Rail. Energy. Traffic. All shifting at once. All slightly misaligned. All connected. Michael studied the data. These are still minor. Eleanor nodded. Yes. Pause. But they won't stay that way. Because she could feel the accumulation. Not building toward a single moment. Spreading across multiple ones. The stranger stood near the doorway. Watching as always. Eleanor turned toward him. This is what happens when they push too far. He nodded calmly. Yes. Michael stepped forward. Can we stop it? The stranger paused. Then answered quietly. You can influence it. A brief silence followed. But you cannot stop it. That changed everything. The objective was no longer prevention. It was reduction. Eleanor inhaled slowly. We need to move now. Michael nodded. Tell them. Eleanor opened the network channel. There was no hesitation this time. No refinement. No second thought. Her message was immediate. Act now. Reduce pressure wherever possible. Do not wait. She paused briefly. Then added another line. Small changes will matter. She sent it. Across the world, the silent network responded. Faster than ever before. Earlier than before. Not perfectly. But deliberately. Rail operators adjusted timing before conflicts formed. Energy controllers redistributed load before spikes appeared. Traffic systems redirected flow before congestion built. Each action small. Each one aligned. Back in the control room, Daniel saw it immediately. The external signals. They were increasing. Not randomly. Strategically. The technician pointed at the display. They're interfering. Daniel shook his head. No, pause. They're countering it. Because their actions reduced pressure instead of adding to it. The analyst frowned. Should we respond? Daniel hesitated. For the first time. He did not answer immediately. That was new. He had always been certain. Even when wrong. Now, he was not. The display updated again. The spread slowed. Not stopped. But reduced. The technician exhaled. That's working. Daniel nodded slowly. Yes. But not because of his system. Because of them. The observers. The network. The ones moving with the system instead of forcing it. Daniel stepped back. For the first time, he was not leading the system. He was watching others influence it more effectively than he could. He spoke quietly. They're not using a model. The analyst looked at him. Then what are they using? Daniel answered slowly. Recognition. The word carried weight now. Not theoretical. Not abstract. Practical. Effective. Across the world, Eleanor stood still again. Feeling the system respond. The spread had slowed. But it had not stopped. Michael looked at her. Did we help? Eleanor nodded. Yes. Pause. But it's not over. Because once the system begins to change at this level, it does not revert easily. The stranger spoke quietly. They have seen the effect. Eleanor nodded. And they will push again. Because that was predictable. Not the pattern. The behavior. Michael exhaled slowly. Then next time will be worse. The stranger did not respond. He did not need to. Back in the control room, Daniel looked at the system. At the slowing spread. At the external signals. At the model that no longer controlled anything. And for the first time, he understood something clearly. He was not studying the system anymore. He was competing with it. And competing with them. He spoke quietly. Prepare the next sequence. The technician hesitated. We just stabilized it. Daniel nodded. Yes. Pause. That's why we push again. Because stopping now meant accepting limits. And Daniel did not accept limits. Across the world, Eleanor closed her eyes once more. The system felt quieter. But not stable. Not finished. She spoke softly. It's not done. Michael nodded. I know. Because now they had seen it. Not just pattern. Not just change. Consequence. Real. Expanding. And impossible to fully control. In forgotten places, where the first event is only the beginning, where systems move beyond prediction, justice does not shout. It whispers. And every act leaves an echo. At 7:28 a.m., Daniel Kessler made the decision to escalate again. Not because the system required it. Because he did. That was the difference now. The system had already shown him something he did not expect. It did not respond to prediction. It did not stabilize under control. It did not return to structure. But Daniel was not trying to return it to what it had been. He was trying to force it into something he could still understand. And that required pressure. More than before. Wider than before. Faster than before. He stood in front of the display, watching the spread slow under the influence of the silent network. Not stopped. Not contained. But reduced. That reduction did not reassure him. It challenged him. Because it proved something he did not want to accept. They were more effective than his model. The technician spoke carefully. The spread rate is decreasing. Daniel nodded. I see it. The analyst added, they're stabilizing the system. Daniel did not respond immediately. Because the word stabilizing did not feel correct. Not anymore. They're delaying it, he said. The room went quiet. Because delay was not resolution. Delay was temporary. And temporary meant the system was still moving. Daniel turned back to the interface. Prepare multi-system escalation. The technician froze slightly. We just reduced pressure. Daniel nodded. Yes. That's why we increase it again. The analyst stepped forward. That will override their adjustments. Daniel looked at him. That's the point. Because if the system responded to interaction, then stronger interaction would reveal deeper behavior. Or break it. Either outcome would give him information. The technician hesitated. This could amplify the spread. Daniel did not hesitate. It will. Pause. Execute on my command. The system prepared. More systems than before. Rail, energy, traffic, logistics, communication timing. Not isolated. Connected. Not subtle. Deliberate. Daniel watched the parameters align. For the first time since the pattern changed, he was not trying to follow it. He was trying to overwhelm it. Execute. The command triggered instantly. Across multiple systems, adjustments cascaded outward. Rail schedules shifted beyond standard margins. Energy loads redistributed faster than normal balancing protocols. Traffic control systems recalculated flows in rapid succession. Communication delays introduced slight timing offsets. Individually, each change remained within operational tolerance. But together, they created a level of pressure the system had not experienced yet. The display reacted immediately. The field that had replaced structure tightened. For a brief moment, it looked like it might collapse inward again. A center almost appeared. The technician leaned forward. It's responding. Daniel remained still. Wait. Because he had seen this before. Temporary structure. False stability. Then it changed. Not gradually. Not predictably. The field did not collapse. It accelerated. The movement intensified. Not toward a point. Across everything. The spread rate doubled. Then increased again. The analyst stepped back. That's not containment. Daniel spoke quietly. No, it's amplification. Because the system had not resisted the pressure. It had absorbed it. And redistributed it faster. The display struggled to render the movement. Updates overlapped. Signals appeared before previous ones resolved. The technician's voice tightened. We're losing resolution. Daniel nodded. I know. Because the system was moving faster than it could be visualized. Faster than it could be modeled. Faster than it could be understood. A new set of alerts appeared. Not minor this time. Rail conflicts in multiple regions. Energy fluctuations exceeding expected thresholds. Traffic systems rerouting continuously without settling. The analyst spoke urgently. These are stacking. Daniel watched closely. Stacking meant accumulation. Accumulation meant escalation. He spoke slowly. Track cumulative pressure. The system calculated. The result appeared. And for the first time, Daniel felt something shift inside him. The technician saw it too. That's too high. Because the pressure was no longer distributing evenly. It was intensifying in overlapping zones. Not forming a center. But creating clusters. Clusters that moved. Clusters that interacted. Clusters that did not dissipate. The analyst whispered, that's not sustainable. Daniel did not answer. Because sustainability was no longer the goal. Understanding was. Across the world, Eleanor felt the shift immediately. Stronger. Faster. Heavier. She stepped forward sharply. They pushed it again. Michael looked at the screen. The signals were increasing. Rapidly. Not isolated. Not contained. They're accelerating it. Eleanor nodded. Yes. Because the system was no longer being influenced. It was being forced. And forced systems respond differently. She opened the network channel. But before she could type, signals flooded in. Faster than before. Operators responding. Adjusting. Trying to reduce pressure. But now, they were too late. The movement was ahead of them. Michael read the incoming data. We can't keep up. Eleanor did not respond. Because she already knew. Recognition required time. And time was gone. The stranger stood in the doorway. Watching. Eleanor turned to him. This is different. He nodded. Yes. Michael stepped forward. Can we slow it? The stranger paused. Then answered quietly. You can try. Not reassurance. Not certainty. Just possibility. Eleanor took a breath. Then typed quickly. Reduce load immediately. Do not wait for alignment. Act now. She sent it. Across the world, the silent network responded again. Faster than before. But not fast enough. Adjustments were made. Pressure reduced in some areas, but increased in others. Because now, every action created new interactions. The system was no longer responding linearly. It was reacting across multiple layers at once. Back in the control room, Daniel saw it. The external signals. They were increasing. But no longer stabilizing the system. They were becoming part of it. The technician spoke quietly. They're not reducing it anymore. Daniel nodded. They're interacting with it. That was the shift. The network was no longer outside the system. It was inside it. And that made everything more complex. The analyst looked at the display. We're feeding it. Daniel did not deny it. Because it was true. Both sides were now influencing the system. And the system was responding to both. At once. He stepped back slowly. For the first time since the experiment began, he was not ahead. He was not behind. He was inside. And inside, there is no clear direction. Only movement. The display updated again. The clusters intensified. Overlapping. Expanding. Not forming structure. But creating something else. The technician whispered, "What happens if it keeps growing?" Daniel answered quietly. "It doesn't stop." Because nothing in the system suggested it would. Across the world, Eleanor closed her eyes. Trying to feel the movement. But this time, it was too much. Too fast. Too widespread. She opened them again. "We're losing it." Michael nodded. "I know." Because now, they were no longer following the pattern. They were reacting to it. And reaction is always late. The stranger spoke softly. "They have reached the threshold." Eleanor looked at him. "What threshold?" He answered calmly. "The point where change no longer slows." Silence. Because that was the point of no return. Not a moment. A condition. And they had reached it. Eleanor took a breath. "Then what do we do?" The stranger looked at her. "You continue." Not because it would stop the system. But because it was the only thing left. Across the world, systems continued to shift. Faster. Wider. Uncontrolled. And for the first time, no one was leading. No one was predicting. No one was controlling. They were all inside it. In forgotten places, where systems move beyond the reach of those who built them, where pressure no longer slows when it should, justice does not shout. It whispers. And every act leaves an echo. At 7:41 a.m., the system stopped behaving like something that could be followed. That was the moment everything changed. Not because movement ended. Because movement no longer needed to be tracked to have impact. The shift began in a way that still looked ordinary. A freight junction outside St. Louis reported a coordination conflict. Two incoming lines reached the same intersection within seconds of each other. That was not unusual. Systems handled that constantly. Schedules adjusted. Signals recalculated. Routes shifted slightly. Everything remained within expected limits. For a few seconds, it looked like any other minor correction. Then it did not resolve. The timing adjustment did not settle into the system. It lingered. Then it moved. Not along the rail path. Not through a sequence. Across systems. Energy demand shifted in the surrounding grid. Traffic rerouted in nearby corridors. Communication signals between dispatch systems desynchronized by small fractions. Each change was minor. Each one manageable. Each one individually explainable. But together, they did not stabilize. They multiplied. In the control room, Daniel saw the transition happen in real time. At first, it looked like noise. Then it organized. Not into structure. Into interaction. The technician leaned closer to the display. It's not resolving. Daniel did not respond. He could already see that the system was not trying to resolve. It was redistributing. The analyst pointed at the screen. The clusters are merging. That had not happened before. Previously, clusters moved independently. Now they overlapped. And where they overlapped, pressure intensified. Daniel stepped forward. Track overlap zones. The system attempted to isolate them. It failed. Because the overlaps were not fixed. They moved. Shifted. Reformed. The technician spoke quietly. We can't isolate a center. Daniel nodded. There isn't one. That was the defining change. There was no longer a point where the system could be understood from. No origin. No convergence. Only interaction across multiple layers. The display updated again. The overlapping zones expanded. Not outward in a clean direction. In multiple directions at once. The system tried to compensate. Rail adjustments triggered energy corrections. Energy corrections triggered traffic reroutes. Traffic reroutes triggered further timing shifts. Each correction created new interactions. Each interaction increased complexity. The technician stepped back slightly. We're feeding it. Daniel did not deny it. Because it was true. Every attempt to stabilize the system created additional movement. The analyst spoke carefully. We need to shut down external adjustments. Daniel shook his head. That won't stop it. Because the system was no longer reacting to individual inputs. It was reacting to the existence of interaction itself. The display flickered briefly as the processing load increased. Data streams overlapped faster than the system could render them. The technician's voice tightened. We're losing visibility. Daniel nodded. I know. That was the critical loss. Not control. Visibility. Without visibility, prediction becomes impossible. Without prediction, response becomes delayed. And delayed response is always insufficient. A new set of alerts appeared. Larger this time. Rail systems in multiple regions reported synchronization conflicts. Energy grids showed overlapping demand spikes. Traffic systems rerouted continuously without settling into stable flow. Communication networks experienced slight but persistent timing offsets. Each issue remained within operational tolerance. But the accumulation was undeniable. Daniel felt it clearly now. The system was no longer producing isolated events. It was generating a condition. Across the room, the technician spoke quietly. This isn't stopping. Daniel answered just as quietly. No, it's continuing. Because nothing in the data suggested a peak. Nothing suggested stabilization. Only ongoing interaction. Across the world, Eleanor felt the change immediately. Not as movement. As density. She stepped back slightly, adjusting her stance as if something had shifted in the space around her. Michael watched her carefully. What changed? Eleanor looked at the screen. It's not spreading anymore. Michael frowned. What do you mean? Eleanor pointed. It's everywhere already. That was the difference. The system had moved beyond expansion. It had reached saturation. Signals flooded in from multiple regions. Rail. Energy. Traffic. All showing simultaneous instability. Michael read the data. These are bigger. Eleanor nodded. Yes. Pause. But still controlled. Because the system was not collapsing. It was adjusting continuously. Maintaining function. While changing behavior. The stranger stood near the doorway. watching without interruption. Eleanor turned toward him. This is the threshold. He nodded. Yes. Michael stepped forward. Can we reduce it? The stranger paused. Then answered quietly. You can influence parts of it. Pause. But not the whole. That clarified the situation. Local influence remained possible. Global control did not. Eleanor took a breath. Then opened the network channel. Her message was direct. Reduce pressure locally. Do not attempt system-wide correction. Focus on immediate surroundings. She sent it. Across the world, the silent network responded. Operators adjusted smaller segments. Localized changes. Focused actions. Trying to prevent overlap zones from intensifying further. For a moment, it helped. In isolated areas, pressure reduced slightly. But in others, it increased. Because the system was not centralized. Every reduction in one place shifted pressure somewhere else. Back in the control room, Daniel observed the same effect. They're fragmenting their response, the technician said. Daniel nodded. It won't scale. Because fragmentation reduces intensity locally but increases interaction globally. The analyst looked at the display. We're beyond coordination. Daniel did not disagree. Because coordination required structure. And structure no longer existed. The display updated again. The overlapping zones tightened. Not into a point. Into a condition that persisted. The technician whispered, what happens if it stays like this? Daniel answered slowly. It becomes the new baseline. Silence followed. Because that meant the system would not return to its previous state. It would continue operating differently. Indefinitely. Across the world, Eleanor closed her eyes again. Trying to feel a direction. There was none. No movement to follow. No structure to interpret. Only presence. She opened her eyes. We can't track it anymore. Michael nodded. I know. Because now, recognition itself had lost its reference. The stranger spoke softly. This is what happens when a system no longer needs to gather before it changes. Eleanor looked at him. And now? He answered calmly. Now you respond without waiting. Because waiting required a signal. And signals no longer preceded outcomes. Back in the control room, Daniel stepped back from the display. For the first time since the beginning, he did not issue a command. He watched. The system continued. Not escalating sharply. Not collapsing. Maintaining a state of continuous interaction. The technician spoke quietly. It stabilized. Daniel shook his head slightly. No, it changed. That was the final realization. Stability implied return. This was not a return. It was a transition. The display showed normal system flow. Rail schedules aligned. Energy grids balanced. Traffic stabilized. Communication timing corrected. Everything appeared normal. But Daniel knew better. Because the underlying behavior had shifted. He spoke quietly. We didn't stop it. Pause. We became part of it. Across the world, Eleanor felt the same thing. The system was quiet again. But not the same. She looked at Michael. It's inside now. Michael frowned. What does that mean? Eleanor answered slowly. It doesn't need to form anymore. The stranger nodded. Yes. Michael looked between them. Then how do we see it next time? The stranger answered simply. You won't. That was the final shift. No build-up. No pattern. No warning. Only outcome. Eleanor felt it clearly. We won't be early again. The stranger looked at her. No, and that means we have to change again. He nodded. Yes. Because the system had already done so. In forgotten places, where change no longer announces itself before it happens, where systems shift without forming visible patterns, justice does not shout. It whispers. And every act leaves an echo. You have been listening to whispers of reckoning. The prediction did not fail because it was inaccurate. It failed because the system no longer needed prediction. And when a system no longer needs prediction, no one is ahead of what comes next.